Fox News alert, we are awaiting remarks from President Trump after his meeting with Senate Republicans earlier today at the White House as the clock ticks down to a partial government shutdown. Let's go to outnumbered overtime. I'm Melissa Francis in today for Harris Faulkner. The House passing a bill last night that delivers more than $5 billion for President Trump's long-promised border wall. Senate Majority Leader McConnell says he supports that bill, but Minority Leader Chuck Schumer vows that Democrats will vote against it. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live with the latest. John.
And the president has been in the Oval Office for more than 35 minutes now as he signs the prison reform bill, and the president has been talking about all of this. We don't yet have the recording of what happened in the Oval Office, but we should have it for you very shortly. The president said that he had a great senators this morning, much the same way as he did with members of the GOP, much the same way as he did with members of the GOP. He said we are going to be working very hard to get something passed in the Senate. Now it's up to the Democrats as to whether or not we have a shutdown tonight. But to hear the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tell it, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tell it, the ball really is in the president's court because Democrats, listen here, are not going to give him what he wants.
There are not the votes in the Senate for an expensive, taxpayer-funded border wall. So, President Trump, you will not get your wall. Abandon your shutdown.
He had a, quote, great meeting with senators this morning, much the same way as he did with members of the GOP House caucus yesterday. He said we are going to be working very hard to get something passed in the Senate. Now it's up to the Democrats as to whether or not we have a shutdown tonight. But to hear the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tell it, the ball really is in the president's court because Democrats are not going to give him what he wants. Listen here.
There are not the votes in the Senate for an expensive, taxpayer-funded border wall. So, President Trump, you will not get your wall. Abandon your shutdown strategy. You're not getting the wall today, next week, or on January 3rd.
So at the moment, it looks like we are lurching toward a shutdown at midnight tonight, and the president kind of flipping a 180 here and trying to blame the Democrats for the shutdown should that happen. The president tweeting out earlier today, quote, the Democrats now own the shutdown, to which Chuck Schumer was only too happy to remind the president about what he has said in the past. Listen here.
In our meeting in the Oval Office, President Trump said, quote, if we don't get what we want, I, President Trump, will
shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it.
I'm not going to blame you for it, except this morning he is now blaming the Democrats for it. Now, Melissa, it's unclear whether the Republicans had the votes to even bring this measure to the floor, let alone pass it. It's likely that they're not going to do the nuclear option. Chad Pergram, our terrific producer up on Capitol Hill, says they are not in the parliamentary posture to do that, which means they're going to need 60 votes, which means that this thing is going to die in the Senate. And then it's a test of wills as to whether the president insists that he's got to have the money or he lets the government shut down, or if there's some quick maneuver in the House that passes what the Senate has already passed. And the president says, I did everything I could and you avoid a shutdown. We're just going to have to wait and see. Melissa?
John, did anyone think it was going to get through the House last night?
The president did. He had that meeting with the 12 members of the GOP conference,
right.
And he came out of that meeting very confident that they were going to put some money in there for border wall funding. But the problem is he's got the votes in the House, and he had a reasonable buffer as well, so he can have a number of Republicans vote against
and Nancy
it. But
Pelosi said he didn't. So
yeah, well, now you know what? There just isn't the margin in the Senate, particularly when you already have two Republicans saying, Hatch and Alexander, saying that they're not going to vote for this measure. So that leaves you with 49 votes, and that doesn't pass a bill.
All right. John Roberts, fantastic as always. Thank you. For more on this, let's bring in Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. She is incoming co-chair of the House Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. Thank you for joining us. Were you surprised that it made it through the House yesterday?
No, I wasn't surprised at what the vote was yesterday. I've never thought that it would make it through the Senate. Democrats all voted against it. I think this is a very sad day, Melissa. We should not be lurching through another government shutdown at the holiday time, putting so many government workers, even though they'll end up probably getting paid, they're going to not know what's happening. It's Homeland Security, it's the custom borders, it's the TSA. This is just not, it's not responsible leadership.
There are many critics who say that the Democrats have voted for this funding before, that it's the same fencing that we have miles and miles of, that Democrats voted for, 700 miles of this not too long ago. Why can't you vote for 215 miles of it now?
It's $5 billion that could be better spent on more border crossing patrol, on technology, on drones. And the president hasn't spent what's been allocated to him already. It's, this just isn't the way to take a stand. That money can be used for other things that people really need the money for. So if we're going to we need to protect the border. There isn't a single Democrat that I know of that doesn't place national security as our #1 responsibility. But this isn't a responsible way to spend our taxpayers' money. And I know that everybody wants us to feel desperate and want to get home for Christmas. There's nobody that wants to be home with their husband more than me. But our job is to stay here and fight for what's right.
Is it a missed opportunity for Democrats if it's something that the president wants so much? It is 0.1% of the budget, and in exchange, you could get something that your constituents really want, because obviously the president has a lot at stake here. You could ask for DACA. I mean, that was the deal before. There are a million different things. Do you feel like it's a little bit of a missed opportunity that you could have gotten something great in exchange for the money?
I think at some point we need to have, we need comprehensive immigration reform.
Yeah.
We need DACA. But you don't throw together at the last minute deals like that are not thought through, this just isn't the way to legislate. It's not responsible government. And the president said he would own it. He doesn't own it. I can't believe we're careening towards a shutdown tonight, but it sure looks like we are. And I've said, I have been compromised isn't a dirty word. I'll work with anybody for what's the right thing, but this is not the right thing.
Critics and regular Americans out there would say, you talk about this isn't the way to legislate. There's been years and years to come up with comprehensive immigration reform. You guys have had continuing resolutions on how you fund the government rather than putting together, a responsible budget ahead of time where everybody sits there and votes and gets together. And there are a lot of Americans at home who feel like you guys, with respect, aren't doing your jobs and aren't legislating the way you just said. How do you respond to those constituents?
Well, I'm going to say that I probably agree with them right about now, but even saying that, Democrats are going to take over the House, and you're going to look at us have appropriation bills done by the time of the summer break. We're intent upon finishing those appropriation bills, but it takes two parties to work together, and we need to move forward. And I've said that comprehensive immigration reform is critical since I've come to the Congress. I've been here 4 years. Republicans have controlled during that time, but I am going to push for comprehensive immigration reform in the new Congress. We need to do it, and we need to not be afraid to compromise or work together, because the American people need for us to do this.
So how do you do that? How do you get there? Because you are right. I mean, everyone says that they want comprehensive immigration reform. When you look at it, we can all agree that the system is broken. It is a need to compromise, and that's something that Claire McCaskill is saying on her way out, is that sitting at the extreme of any party doesn't work, isn't going to help. So how do you bring that kind of, trading and negotiating back? Do you use even the bill that we just saw on criminal justice reform? Is that a model, maybe?
That is a model. What you need to see is Republicans and Democrats working together, which you do have some members doing. I happen to be one of them. I have a lot of Republicans that are friends. And you need to work together to find a way that you can build the most votes. The other important thing is, and this becomes very insider in a way, is that you need rule changes so that, we have become in some ways tyranny of the minority, so that a small group of, Freedom Caucus or others have been able to prevent things from coming to the forefront when a lot of members would support something. You are going to see rule change packages. in the new Congress that Democrats are going to move forward, but you're also going to see a proposal for a joint, to look at the rules of the Congress, period, and how we all operate. So perhaps we will be better able to, with rules changes, move things through that a majority of us think that we need to do. But
no, wait, let me stop you there and ask you about that, because that's music to my ears. Because a lot of times what frustrates people on the outside is when you guys say you're hamstrung by the rules that you yourself created. So it's wonderful to hear you say that you want to do away with this tyranny of the minority. What's an example of a rule change that would have helped in this particular situation that you guys are proposing?
Well, I don't, on the budget, this is, I'm going to talk about, let's talk about comprehensive immigration reform.
Yeah.
So if you get it, it's going to be, if you have a discharge petition or you've got a certain number of co-sponsors of a bill, you will be able to get the bill to the floor and have a discussion and have an up and down vote.
Wow. How do you encourage more people to work with the other side of the aisle when so many have been elected and say on your side in their opposition to President Trump, and they feel like by virtue of compromising and going out there that it's going to be held against them later by people? I mean, they could face a primary challenge. Look what Ocasio-Cortez did, and those who feel like if they compromise and they're moderate at all, they're going to have the same kind of problem with their own constituents. What do you say to them?
You know what I say? I think I'm lucky. I'm somebody, you know this, that is just pretty straightforward, and I say what I think. And I think you need to know who you are. You need to know what your values are. And I say that I have a very diverse district. I have working men and women. I'm one of the people that predicted that President Trump could get elected 2 years ago because I was listening to them. But I also have a university town and many, many progressives. And I don't say a different thing on one side of my district that I say to the other. You need to know what's right. You need to not be afraid to stand up for what you're right and sit down and talk to your constituents and try to get them to put themselves in each other's shoes, hear their perspectives, understand their perspectives.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, thank you so much for your perspective today. Very calm, very rational and level-headed. We really enjoyed it. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. President Trump and Congress, boy, look at your screen there. Everybody appears to be on a collision course here. The deadline to fund the government is coming. There are growing questions right now over who to blame if there's a partial government shutdown. The president pointing the finger now at Democrats, tweeting this morning, quote, "The Democrats whose votes we need in the Senate will probably vote against border security in the wall, even though they know it is desperately needed. If the Dems vote no, there will be a shutdown that will last for a very long time. People don't want open borders and crime." For more on this, I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, for more on this, let's bring in Congressman Chris Stewart. He is a Republican of Utah. He is a member of the Appropriations Committee. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. What do you think is going to happen now?
Well, I mean, who knows? And if anyone pretends they know, they are just doing that. They're pretending. But I tell you what, there's a couple things that I think are points worth making. Number one is what we proposed to the Democratic Party isn't outrageous. All we want is border security. And if they're not willing to give us that, if they're actually willing to shut down the government because of that, I don't know how you go back home and explain that.
Okay.
And the second thing is this. There's a way out of this, and that's for the Senate to get rid of this, I think, absurd rule where it takes 60 votes for appropriations for year-to-year funding of the government. If it's long-term legislation that will last forever, I understand why perhaps a 60-vote threshold. But the annual just budgeting of our government year-to-year, I just don't think it should be, and that would take care of this problem.
Okay, let me address your first point, because the guest that was on before you, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, said that the money would be better spent on other things for border security, like drones, like personnel, that sort of thing. And she said also that the president hasn't spent the money that was appropriated to him last year. So why is he holding up the government for more? How do you respond to those 2 points?
Well, look, if we shut down or didn't fund agencies that didn't spend every dollar that they were given the year before, every one of them wouldn't get any more money. Virtually every one of them have unspent funds. That's not unusual at all, especially when you're reprioritizing and giving them more money like we've tried to do. And so, look, that's just not an argument for doing this. And the second thing is $5 billion, you're right. It doesn't have to be a physical 2,000-mile wall. I don't think the president supports that or is proposing that necessarily. But there are things that we could do. And if you want to see the example, look at Israel as I think the best example. Those are the things that the president and the Republican Congress is trying to achieve, and the same things that the Democrats are saying no to.
Yeah. And you talked about this idea of the budget process. I mean, Americans at home cannot believe that you guys keep getting to this point where you're slapping on these Band-Aids of a continuing resolution and really, in our eyes, are not doing your most basic job. How do you respond to that?
I couldn't agree more. And I sit on two great committees, Intelligence and Appropriations, and I love my work on Intel, and I'm frustrated the life out of me in my work on Appropriations. And that is, we do all of this work, you know, dozens and dozens of hearings, hours of work through the year, and then we get to December and we just throw it all away. And we end up doing these CRs, or we end up doing an omnibus, and it's outrageous.
How do you stop that?
Well, again, if the Senate didn't have this 60-vote threshold where the annual appropriations, just funding the government, is still subject to 60 votes, then we'll never change this. And that's just the truth. Republicans or Democrats in charge, it doesn't matter. As long as we have that threshold, we're never going to change this. It's going to be every December, shut down, the countdown clock to shut down. The American people got tired of it a long time ago. We should just fix it.
So, I mean, that's one thing that you and the Congresswoman who came before you agree upon, the fact that all the rules need to be changed.
Yeah. And by the way, if the Democrats were in charge of the Senate, I would still say this. It's not just it's easy to say because the Republicans hold the Senate. I would argue this regardless of who holds the Senate. Let them vote, get 51 votes, and if it's the wrong thing, the American people will respond to that. The democracy works. If you're taking votes the American people don't appreciate, they will punish you for that. But the way it is now, we can't take a vote. We can't get there.
How do you get to a place where there's more compromise and more working together? Because I think one thing that we've seen over the past couple of years is that when everybody retreats to their extreme side, almost nothing gets done. With criminal justice reform, we saw coalitions come together that you wouldn't, I mean, it's, you know, the phrase strange bedfellows. How do you get to a point where there's more working together?
Well, again, if you know the answer to that, please tell us, because many of us have been searching for that for a long time. And I think there is some good news on that, and that is there are some issues that aren't partisan or they haven't been made partisan. Criminal justice was a pretty good example of that.
It's a tricky, no, that's a tricky one, though.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a tricky one, and brought together strange people that wouldn't normally be agreeing, and someone went over and brokered quietly with someone else to get a group together. I mean, is that it, that there has to be more quiet behind-the-scenes work to get a group together, maybe less that's you know, fire in front of the camera? There was some secret ingredient there.
Well, and I think I would maybe make two comments on that. I mean, criminal justice could have been blown up with partisanship because, as you said, there were strange bedfellows, but they didn't do that. There are a number of issues where we do work together. We don't get a lot of attention, but we actually do. But there are a few issues, and immigration is one of them, that it's just, we're beyond being able to just put aside our partisan differences. It's become so polarized, and it's not just with this president. It became polarized, frankly, under President Bush, you know, quite a long time ago. And that makes it much, much more difficult, which is, if you'll forgive me for bringing this up again, but that's where, once again, if we came back to the filibuster rule in the Senate.
All right, we have to cut you off. I'm so sorry, sir. Thank you. Chris Stewart from Utah. The president's remarks just ahead of the bill signing. Let's listen.
Here we've had a very busy 2 or 3 days. It's been very positive. Things are happening that haven't happened in our government for a long time. The other night, as you know, we had a vote on border security, and I think we want to discuss this just for a second. But the House of Representatives voted 217 to 185, approving strong border security and the money necessary to take care of the barrier, wall, or steel slats, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same. It was a tremendous evening for the Republicans, to be honest with you, because the level of spirit, the level of happiness. A lot of people came out, they said they have never seen, one man in particular, he's been there for over 20 years, he said, I've never seen spirit or enthusiasm like this. They came from all parts of the country. A couple of them came from other parts outside, so I say all parts of the world, in order to vote. And they voted, and it was an incredible vote. And we were told that you would never get the House to vote. Well, we were able to get the House to vote. And it wasn't that we did it, they did it. They were incredible. So I want to thank, in this case, House Republicans, because what they did was rather incredible. And now the Senate is looking at it. We just had a meeting with some of our great senator Republicans and lasted for a long time. Tremendous enthusiasm for border security. And I think I can speak for them very strongly when I say they want to see something happen on border security. They want the security of safety. They want safety for our country. Drugs are pouring in, and we've done an incredible job considering we have no barrier. But drugs are pouring into our country. Human trafficking is at the all-time worst in history because of the internet. And the human trafficking problem is a problem that has gone on through the ages, but it's never been worse because of the internet all over the world. This isn't the United States, this is all over the world. So we need border security, and the Republicans in the Senate, as you know, are taking it up today. And it's really up to the Democrats, totally up to the Democrats as to whether or not we have a shutdown. It's possible that we'll have a shutdown. I would say the chances are probably very good because I don't think Democrats care so much about maybe this issue, but this is a very big issue. It's an issue of crime. It's an issue of safety. It's an issue of least importantly, dollars. Spend $285 billion a year on illegal immigration. We have to finally do it. The wall will pay for itself on a monthly basis. I mean, literally every month it pays for itself. So we're talking about small amounts of money. Think of it, we approved and we got good Democrat support. Military last year, $700 billion. Recently, $716 billion for the military. And here we're talking about $5 billion. So it's a tiny fraction, but unfortunately, they've devoted their lives to making sure it doesn't happen. And that wasn't for what should happen. That was for political reasons. So we are going to be working very hard to get something passed in the Senate. There's a very good chance it won't get passed. It's up to the Democrats. So it's really the Democrat shutdown, because we've done our thing. When Nancy Pelosi said you'll never get the votes in the House, we got them, and we got them by a big margin, 217 to 185. So now it's up to the Democrats as to whether or not we have a shutdown tonight. I hope we don't, but we're totally prepared for a very long shutdown. And this is our only chance that we'll ever have, in our opinion, because of the world and the way it breaks out, to get great border security. Ronald Reagan tried many years ago, got a note from a member of his family, many years ago tried to get a wall. And he fought for a long time during his entire term, and he was never able to get a wall. And I consider him to be a great president. He knew what he was doing. We are going to, one way or the other, we're going to get a wall, we're going to get a barrier, we're going to get anything you want to name it. You can name it anything you want. But we cannot let what's been going on in this country over the last 10 years, we just can't let it happen. Now to a very positive note. Criminal justice reform. Everybody said it couldn't be done. They said the conservatives won't approve it. They said the liberals won't approve it. They said nobody's going to approve it. Everybody's going to be against it. It's been many, many years, numerous decades, and nobody came close. And I just want to thank all of the people standing behind me. I want to thank my daughter Ivanka, my son-in-law Jared Kushner. I want to thank And I have to say, I want to thank Paul and Kevin. I want to thank Mitch. I want to thank Nancy and Chuck, as I say, affectionately, actually. But I do. I want to thank everybody. This was incredible bipartisan support. Mike, you were great. Mike Pence, everybody. Everybody worked so hard on this. And I look at, behind me, I said, this is a cross-section of everybody in our country. We have everybody here. I won't go into details because I'll get myself into trouble if I go into too many of those details. We have everybody wanting this. We had a few people that didn't, and that's okay. It's impossible to get 100%, but we passed this in the Senate 87-12. That's unheard of. And the one person that missed the vote was actually in Afghanistan doing a very good
Okay,
job.
so the president there is talking about the criminal justice reform bill, the Fresh Start bill, that has already passed. And so we want to move on and back to his original topic where he was talking about the fight over the border wall, which is ongoing right now on the floor of the Senate. Let's bring in our power panel. Alexis Wilkes is executive director of the America Rising PAC, and we have Artwan Seawright. He is Democratic strategist. Thanks to both of you for joining us. So the president just now saying he's going to lay it at the feet of Democrats, that the House passed a bill with the money in it, that he's ready to sign it. He sent it over to the Senate. All the Senate has to do is sign it, that they're going to be the ones that don't vote for it, so it's going to be their fault. I bet you don't agree with him saying that.
I don't. It's just classic Donald Trump trying to hoodwink the American people about something that's just fundamentally not true. We're having this discussion because he campaigned on the fact that Mexico is going to pay for a wall. That has not happened to this point. He is in these ongoing conversations trying to convince himself that Democrats do not want border security, which we know that's not true. We want border security, but we just don't want to do a wall that's not needed. Let's do something comprehensive. Let's do all the things that we should have done a very long time ago. Let's pass what 60% of the country want, comprehensive immigration reform. So here we are. The Senate passes a continuing resolution to get us to February, and the House blows it up, doesn't do what the Senate wants to do, so we're on the verge of a government shutdown because of Trump.
Alex, he said, they're willing to put money towards border security, just not a wall. The president has even said it's not a wall. It's, steel slats and it's drones and it's people at the border, that it in fact isn't a wall.
Sure. I think that the wall kind of represents a number of different security measures that they're looking to take at the border. I think on this issue, Democrats have a little bit of selective amnesia on this issue. Because back in 2013, for example, when a similar bill came up about border security and border funding, all 54 Democrats in the Senate supported it. Even Hillary Clinton back in 2010, at that time, was bragging about having supported a border wall or a border barrier. And just as recently in 2018, back in the midterms, many of these red state Democrats who ultimately prevailed narrowly in some cases did so by campaigning on the wall.
And I want to bring people up to date on what's going on the floor of the Senate, because that's where the action is right now. And they are having a procedural vote that would just bring them to the point of getting started on the vote. We don't know how many senators are there. This was the problem in the House, is that Nancy Pelosi said she knew how the vote was going to go, but this was a while ago before people started to go home, and it's sort of anyone's guess. Right now in the Senate, we have learned, though, that Jeff Flake has voted no on the procedural vote to even bring the whole thing to the floor. That's a no. So if you look at the way that everything has to fall, now some are wondering if they even get there, will they have to bring in Mike Pence to break a tie? We have no idea at this point, but this is how these things are shaking out.
Melissa,
go ahead.
Here we are. The president received money for his quote-unquote wall or border security in the last continuing resolution. That money has yet to be spent
but
totally.
Do you want to live or die by that? Because there's a whole bunch of different funds and things that haven't spent.
So let me finish this thought.
Okay.
So we have
that. Makes that point moot.
So no, it doesn't. So the Senate put.
Well, then you want to live by every single committee that doesn't spend their money or project, and you don't get any more?
If the Senate says let's do this in February, he can't spend $5 billion between now and February to do anything with the wall. So let's not wait until February, wait until the new Congress, and let's get together and let's figure out how to do something more comprehensive and deal with border security in a real way.
But they never do that. Is the problem. I hear you and I agree with you, and I think everybody out there in America is sick of these Band-Aids and these stopgap measures. Why is it both sides are horribly guilty of
about this wall at this point?
Why? I couldn't agree more. Why can't Congress get together like adults and pass a budget like millions of Americans do in their household every single month? This would alleviate the need need for all of these holiday, catastrophes where we're wondering if the government's going to be shut down. Really, Congress should be passing a budget, and we should be debating these issues on their own because they are deserving, they merit their own debate and funding.
So before you guys came on, we had a congressman from the left and a woman from the left. You know what I'm saying? We had both sides on, and they said that the problem is the rules, that it's the tyranny of the minority, and that the way the rules work is what's killing the whole process and stopping people from working together, and they want to change it. Do you believe that?
I'm willing to bet there's a bipartisan group of people who want to do immigration reform or want to do border security, but they do not want to separate issues as the president is trying to do, one or the other, border security or the wall. You can't separate the two. The wall can be a part of a package that does border security, but again, I've had Republicans on this network hear them say, we do not need all this wall funding. We do not need this theoretical wall that the president talks about.
But it's just theoretical. I mean, that's the whole thing. Is that
that's my point. So if that's the case, let's do border security. Let's not focus our efforts on the tension of a wall.
So if he said $6 billion, this $6 billion is for border security, then you think Democrats should vote yes today?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying
that sounded like it.
No. I think you are trying to insert words in my mouth.
No,
what I'm saying is
okay.
Overall border security that does not just go to a wall. It's not
but
dedicated
he's already said
to
that
just
it's
a
not
wall.
just a wall.
The president has been mixed messages on that.
The Democrats have the mixed messages on this. They redefine everything as border wall, border security when it's convenient.
Alex, you all have done that from the beginning.
Look, the Democrats have consistently supported this when it has been convenient to them. Now that they're coming off of 2018, when they've had midterm victories and they're getting ready to take over the House of Representatives, they're throwing they're throwing up all the roadblocks for political gamesmanship.
Alex, you know why that point doesn't work? Because guess who controls the House and the Senate? And if Republicans wanted to pass the wall funding, if they wanted to do whatever it is they want to do, just like they did the tax bill and a million other things,
they can't get it past the Senate right now
because there are Republicans who are not buying into the idea of this wall. So, but you can't shift the blame to the Democrats, saying it's the Democrats' fault that this is not going to happen.
That's her. Look at her. I'm not going to say that.
If they need 60 votes in the Senate, they would need Democrats, regardless of whether this is the 2018 session or the 2019 session.
Okay, we got to go. Good stuff, guys. Thank you very much. Ahead, a major international airport forced to shut down for a second time, stranding hundreds of passengers ahead of the holiday weekend. We'll tell you where it is and why this is happening. Plus, new reaction to the surprise resignation of Defense Secretary James Mattis, the fallout for the military and world allies and the president. That's ahead. Britain's second largest airport, Gatwick, forced to shut down its runway for the second time after another report of a drone illegally in the runway area. Let's go live to Kitty Logan in London with more on this. Kitty.
Hi. Well, Gatwick Airport had reopened earlier today. It was previously closed for around 36 hours. But in the last couple of hours, as you mentioned, there has been an unconfirmed sighting of another drone in the area of the runway. Now, around 700 flights were due to take off and land on Friday, but those flights have been halted again temporarily amid fears that a drone could risk passenger safety if it interfered with an aircraft taking off or landing. Now, police are investigating this incident, which has been going on since Wednesday night, but they still don't know who's behind it. They say they have several leads, but they do believe now that this disruption is intentional, because what's been happening is that police have been chasing the drone or the drone pilot, and whenever they get nearby, it disappears, but when the airport reopens, the drones start flying again. And it's also something of a mystery, because now police and the army have become involved, and they have put up specialist jamming equipment to try and prevent these drones from flying near the airport. That doesn't seem to be working at this point in time, although there's a huge police presence now in the area. They're trying to get this airport back up and running. Of course, all this is of little comfort to the hundreds of thousands of passengers who have been stranded, some of them since Wednesday evening, and they continue continue to face delays. Now, Gatwick Airport is London's second airport and also the second busiest airport in the UK. And of course, you can imagine at this time, just before the Christmas holidays, it is absolutely the busiest time of year to travel, and people now facing serious concerns that they may not get away in time for Christmas. Back to you.
How frustrating. Oh, Katie Logan. All right. Thank you for that. And we have another Fox News alert. Defense Secretary James Mattis announced he will be leaving the Pentagon in February, his decision coming the day after President Trump moved to withdraw all 2,000 U.S. troops from Syria. Mattis telling the president in his resignation letter, quote, "Because you have the right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours on these and other subjects, I believe it is right for me to step down from my position." Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon with more. Jennifer.
Melissa, it's the first time in 40 years a cabinet official has resigned over a policy difference with the president. The last person to do so was Jimmy Carter's Secretary of State, Cyrus Vance, during the failed Iran hostage rescue, which he opposed. Pentagon officials tell me Mattis is resigning in protest over the president's national security policies. I'm told the final straw for Mattis was the president's order to withdraw from Syria. The last 18 hours sealed his decision, I'm told. It appears his resignation letter had already been written. I'm told Mattis went over to the White House at about 3 p.m. yesterday with his resignation letter in hand. He spent about 45 minutes with the president. He did not try to change the president's mind on Syria, as some have reported. Before leaving for the White House, he watched the president's video explaining his decision to pull out of Syria, with Mr. Trump pointing to the sky saying he was doing it for the troops who had died. 50 copies of Mattis's resignation letter had already been printed and were in a folder in his office to be distributed upon his return from the White House. Mattis believes pulling out of Syria is a betrayal of the Kurds and the Syrian Democratic Forces, U.S. allies who U.S. military leaders believe will be slaughtered after the U.S. leaves Syria. Here are the highlights from the Mattis resignation letter. Quote, "My views on treating allies with respect and also being clear-eyed about both malign actors and strategic competitors are strongly held and informed by over 4 decades of immersion in these issues. From the beginning, Mattis was concerned about how President Trump treated U.S. allies and spent much of his time as defense secretary reassuring those allies after President Trump disrespected them and made decisions without consulting NATO, South Korea, and other allies. And now the Pentagon is being told to prepare to withdraw about 7,000 or half the troops from Afghanistan against the advice of his senior military leaders. I'm told to expect more resignations. A recent poll conducted by the Military Times shows Secretary Mattis has an 84% approval rating among the troops, 90% among general officers. Melissa?
All right, Jennifer, thank you for that report. Let's bring in Colonel David Hunt. He is retired former Special Operations and a Fox News contributor. I would ask you, General Mattis said this is a betrayal of the Kurds and others. Do you agree with that?
Yes, this is the third time we've hurt the Kurds. 4 years ago, Melissa, the Turkish-Syrian border was closed. It was closed by ISIS, that Syria helped form, by the way. The U.S. nor Turkey they didn't want to touch that issue. The Syrian Kurds reopened that border. The Kurds have been our friends. They're great fighters. We have hurt the Kurds with lack of support for 20 years, and they still fight. The issue is, I think on instinct, the president's right about Afghanistan, which is 17 years, and Syria. But you don't have to leave completely. You can leave a very powerful 500 to 1,000 person force with air support. You have to keep influence in this area because of Iran, Russia, Turkey, and clearly Syria. The same with Afghanistan. We're still in a fight from 9/11 called the War on Terror. So, yes, we lost what's happening in Afghanistan. We lost what happened in Iraq. But we leave soldiers, special operations people, spies, drones, and aircraft to support them. About 500 to 1,000 in each country to keep influence. I think the issue was the instinctive withdrawal of 2,000, pull back 7,000 without thinking through the influence issue.
There is still the possibility of doing that. You're talking about leaving behind in Afghanistan, I think it's 14,000. So to leave 500 or 1,000 behind is a small fraction of that. there's still the opportunity to do that if the next, chief comes in and talks him into that, no?
Yes, but we have to stop all this training of the Afghans. We try to do foreign interdiction. It's called FID. The point is we've got to just do counterterrorism. That's why the force would be small. If you get into nation building, which we failed at in Iraq and failed in Afghanistan, it just didn't work. However, we can go from point A to point B and kill things better than anybody in the world. So leave a force to fight the terror mission, some intel, and continue to influence those two places. We should never pull everybody out, but absolutely get the major number of the forces out of there.
Okay.
Because it hasn't worked.
No,
it just hasn't worked.
That is a reasonable point that a lot of people have made, that if you leave just the counterterrorism forces, and some people who have supported the president's decision have said, we don't need those folks on the ground training, we just need the counterterror group.
No, we don't. It didn't work.
And do you think that it does seem like that maybe, though, General Mattis's resignation wasn't over just this? I mean, there was the idea that these two were not meshing for a long period of time. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we should not talk about Jim Mattis. I actually know him for a year. And in a vacuum, we've got to look at it with Kelly gone and Mattis. Jennifer Griffith is one of the best reporters on television. With no argument. I just think my belief is, she's got phenomenal sources, is that Mattis and Kelly were told to resign. They would never quit on their own. I get all the people that are saying he prepared the letter. But these are four-star guys, very, very tough, who have never quit a job in their adult lives. They serve the nation, not an individual. So I think the conversation is very simple. We expect your letter of resignation to both of them. But the point is, we've lost two coordinators and good men at the same time, while we're trying to withdraw major forces out of Afghanistan and Syria and all the other issues we've got. We're okay. This is the greatest country in the world. We've got great people in the Pentagon.
But
we'll have good people that can be chief of staff. But it is chaotic for the moment, and a lot of people, I think, are overreacting to it. Both these guys, Kelly and Mattis, are good men.
Colonel Hunt, thank you for your time. We appreciate your perspective and your unique insight. Thank you. New reports suggesting special counsel Robert Mueller is close to finally wrapping up the Russia probe. A live report on the latest details next, plus reaction from Ken Starr. Don't go away.